All right, all really important topics. So we have the last session, but before lunch, and another really interesting one for all the people here. So this is the road to becoming a Web3 security specialist by Joran Honig from Consensus Diligence. Please welcome Joran.
Thanks for the introduction. Yeah, so I'm going to be speaking a little bit about the road to becoming a Web3 security specialist. To give a little bit of background, I myself started my journey on Web3 security by implementing Mithril, symbolic execution engine for the EVM. This is maybe a little bit of an unconventional way to start out doing security things, and it's also, well, does work. Works really well. It might not be the most efficient way. So today I want to talk about like how you can design your own like pathway or road to becoming a security specialist, what things you need to look out for, and also kind of like what not to focus on, like what's the important things and what's not the important things. So kind of what I want you to do is not waste all of your time doing like only reading blog posts all the time and never actually trying to do anything related to security. All right. Well, that doesn't work. Okay. Unfortunately, the picture's not working. Let me see if I can fix that real quick. Okay. Nope. Fingers crossed. Now it's black. Okay. Awesome. Pictures, yay. 10x improvement for the talk. Okay, so very simply put, there's going to be two parts to this talk. How do you get there and how do you stay there? And it's interesting how kind of getting to be a security specialist is very similar to staying there. Like the types of things you focus on end up being the same in the end, although maybe the activities are slightly different in your approach as well. Okay, so first, how to get there. Which makes chronological sense. I think that it's very easy to focus on the wrong things when you just get started. I feel like personally, like 80% of the information you need to learn to become a security specialist is just like the basics, like how does Solidity work, how does the EVM work, but there's a key thing here is not enough to just know like how to deploy a smart contract, or it's not enough to know like that opcodes use gas and like that you kind of know how things work on a high level, but not really when anybody asks you real questions. Like you got to know these little details about the EVM that are very important. And I think, so there's a short quote on this slide here from 5 Elements of Effective Thinking, which is a very short book, but I think it's very much worth reading. And one of the things, so this is a book written by some mathematicians that teach math in a university, and they figured out like what are the patterns that students have that make them succeed at math, and those things actually work like pretty generically for learning in general. And so one of the things is that what sets the specialists apart from the common crowd is a very deep understanding of like the material. So in the book, there's an example of a violin player being really, really good at a very simple piece of music, even though, and practicing this over and over, even though it's very simple, like they would get so much better at it, and in doing so become a much better violinist. And I think the same is true for DeFi security. Like if you have an insanely thorough understanding of the EVM or Solidity, this just gives you information at the time you need it to find bugs that others would have missed. And I think to give you like, oh no. To give you like a kind of a benchmark for how deep I think you should go with learning the basics is, I think you should know most of DeFi architecture better than the developers themselves. And this is kind of a very vague benchmark because it's just impossible to define anything. Yeah, and essentially what you're learning here is security agnostic. So you're not necessarily thinking about security or learning about security when you learn these basics. Like you can play around with Huff or build your own symbolic execution engine, maybe build a fuzzer. Building tools is an interesting way of getting to learn something deeply. You are not necessarily thinking about how to exploit smart contracts using the EVM, but just building that knowledge. And that knowledge on its own will pay its dividends later on. All right. So there are so many ways that you can go about like building the basics, learning, setting up your basic knowledge. I think like there's tons of blog posts out there, projects. There's so many roadmaps on GitHub, you know, with all the links. There's a couple of good ones out there. I think it's difficult to go wrong. If anything, don't stay reading the same kind of blog posts too long. Like there's also like a little bit of a rabbit hole, like you gotta understand things deeply, but if you focus only on learning the EVM and nothing else, that's maybe also not a good use of your time. And so I have a little spoiler here too. So towards the end of the presentation, I set up kind of like this interesting thing of content curation, essentially, of different blog posts and roadmaps that you might be able to use on your journey. But more on that later. All right, so I think the first part is building the foundation, like foundational knowledge of just the environment. The second part, and probably the part that sounds the most sexy and interesting, is the attacker mindset. And this term is often used without any definition. People just throw it around, oh, you gotta think like an attacker. I don't know, what's it even mean? So to me, the attacker mindset is a couple of things. On the one hand, it's like these thinking patterns that are both innate and come from experience that allow you to just take an idea and mess with it. So this is also something interesting and why I put in lead Web 2 hackers. I have full confidence that a lead Web 2 hacker that's built these mental models of how to play around with ideas in such a way that they can see the perspective that the developers don't have to actually see if there's something possible with the system that wasn't intentional. This is, here's another book by mathematicians called How to Solve It. Way older, I think it's like early last century. And this book also describes how, or the difference between students and experienced mathematicians. And in one of the early chapters, it shows like a simple like puzzle, really, where you had to connect like multiple dots. Like maybe you know the game where you have 2 red dots, 2 green dots, 2 blue dots, and you got to connect them all without crossing the lines. And this was an interesting example because the author explains how mathematicians have this, because of their practice, like in their toolbox, their mathematicians, attackers mindset, they have this kind of thing where I think he called it the concept of isomorphism. Like they instantly in their brain map the configuration of dots to a different format where it's very easy to connect all the dots. And I think A phenomenon like this is exactly what the attacker mindset is. It's like the ability of your brain or your experience really to take something and play around with it, look at it from different angles that allow you to find issues. That said, I think there's more to it. I think, yeah, that's going to be on the next slide. Okay, so I don't think you can build a universal, infallible attacker mindset. Like, it's not perfect. Like, everybody is kind of unique in how they build their experience, and this is kind of why everybody wants multiple auditors to look at their project, because they'll just find different things. This also means you'll miss things, inevitably. This is just, yeah, a problem of being human, I guess. Although AIs also miss almost everything for now. Also, it takes a very long time to really build this part of your tool set. Like, building a good attacker mindset will take you quite a time. Okay, so how do you even build this? I think, so I was talking to a couple people the other day about security training, like how do you get to become a very good auditor? And one of the things that came out of this discussion, or what we talked about, is what's happening around Code Arena. So, and Sherlock, or this type of contest model. And I think, and so the phenomenon that we see happening that is so great for building your attacker mindset is the ability to have what's commonly called deliberate practice. So you have the ability to try your hand at a real smart contract, like you try your hand at auditing, and this is the important part, you have a feedback loop, I don't know what the timeline is, 2 weeks to a couple months later, where you can actually check back and see what you missed. And I think this is the most important thing to do when you're like kind of starting out, is this part. Like, you try your hand at it and then review what you missed. And that kind of deliberate practice will allow you to build up like this kind of expertise. And it's important to go over the issues that you missed and then see kind of why you missed them, and kind of make a general pattern for yourself that allows you to find this bug in the future. So I wrote down imitate and make your own, like just looking at bounty reports or whatever, something like this, figuring out how the bug actually happened. So maybe the Euler bug was like a liquidation event with some environmental situation that made it vulnerable. So, oh no. So you can look at this and think like, hey, liquidations are probably very difficult to implement. And in this case, there's like these environmental factors where you can instantly make a position liquidatable. You can look at this pattern and think, hey, so what if I like go out and search for situations where you have positions that can be liquidated, where I can create them and instantly make them liquidatable. Like, this is a very interesting and vulnerable pattern, and Euler's definitely not the first to make this mistake. So, yeah. Once you have this, you have kind of this additional tool in your attacker mindset toolbox, and you can continue. And over time, you'll also develop these more generalized mental patterns. Okay, how to stay there? So what do you do when you actually achieve being a security specialist, which is still a pretty vague term, is pretty much the same. I think the thing that most like smart auditors do is, and not even to stay a smart auditor, just because they're interested, is they just keep exploring. So once you're into Solidity smart contracts, you have like understand them pretty well. Now go and look at Cairo or something else. And I think in all of this, it's very important to keep going for that deep understanding. So one of the topics for today, maybe 1 or 2 talks, I'm not sure, is kind of like using fuzzing and doing property-based testing. There's kind of a couple levels of depth that you can go here. You can first learn how the tool works, like how do you set things up, how do you do a fuzzing campaign, all that fun stuff, and you can start finding bugs. But I feel like this is still like a fairly superficial type of understanding, and I would recommend you to like play around with the tool itself and actually try to figure out how it's doing the fuzzing. Because once you get to a point where you actually understand how the different fuzzers work, how Foundry works, how the Echidna fuzzer works, you actually achieve something that's going to help you also use the tools better. Because all of these tools have flaws. Like, there's just certain things that are very difficult for fuzzers to do, and there's certain ways of going about writing properties that make a lot of sense if you know how things work. And this type of understanding is just not available to you if you just do the basic tutorial and use it. Although over time, of course, like you'll build a better understanding as you use it, but I would just go deep down the rabbit hole, enjoy the rabbit hole, and then continue. So to build the attacker mindset, I think it's important to kind of build this feed of information. And I think there's kind of 2 prongs to this. So, this is at least what I look at. On the one hand, there's the stream of bug bounty reports and postmortems, and I think these are probably some of the most interesting because these are the bugs that other auditors and developers missed. And so it's important for you to also know about them so that you don't miss them next time. It's also usually a stream of like critical bugs that are super interesting and worth checking out. But I think it's also worth not sticking to just this, the cool hacks like, whoa, 10 million, 100 million got hacked, I want to know how it works. I think it's also pretty much worth checking out audit reports from reports from Code Arena, and audit reports from some of the top auditing firms. Like, just scroll through them and see if there's any type of bug that you haven't looked for before that you think you might have missed. I think like a quick skim of a couple of alert reports every week or every month, and then just taking a few and diving a little bit deeper on those issues, definitely worth your time. And it's important to also do these because there's always new things in security. And these are going to be kind of the bugs that auditors are looking for right now. So if you don't know about these, you'll be one of the auditors that lets it get into production, into the first class of bugs. So yeah, I would definitely do both. And then the other thing is practice. So, brains are very slow to optimize, although if you use a particular type of thinking a whole bunch, it starts to optimize really well. So the more time you spend hacking and thinking and playing around with ideas and systems, looking at them from different perspectives, the easier this will become for you. And I guess the faster and the more bugs you'll find. Okay, so how does this learning and approach reflect in practice? I feel like auditing in a way, or finding bugs, is all about just asking questions. So here, I hope it's readable, I think it is a sequence of questions and in a situation that kind of highlights which parts are this foundational knowledge and which parts are the attacker mindset. So this is loosely based on the Euler hack, not really, like a couple of details don't match up, but it's just to highlight this idea. Okay, So the first part is like asking the right question. So this is the attacker mindset, like knowing which questions to ask. So in this case, it's like you know to ask for like to see if there's a situation where an attacker might be able to turn a profit doing a liquidation. And so the answer to the question is also important. And in this case, you'll have to look at the code. So again, so in this case, I'm assuming, yes, that's possible. Second question, it's very important to make the profit instantly. If you can make a profit and it takes you months, it's not very interesting from a security perspective. So this is also kind of the attacker mindset. Then another code understanding answer. And eventually, you have this question of, okay, I got to send these 2 transactions. And is it possible that someone might mess with my attack? So this is like also the attacker mindset, like is someone gonna hack you while you try to hack this thing? And the answer is gonna be yes, potentially here. And that's part of that foundational knowledge, like knowing what guarantees you have when you submit a transaction through the mempool, or even like what are the conditions that you have when you submit it through Flashbots. Because Flashbots has a lot of edge cases and interesting pieces as well, where you might think, oh, I just submitted and nobody knows about my transaction, nobody can sandwich it or whatever. This isn't always the case. It's not that simple. And that's why it's very important to have that foundational knowledge. Yep. All right, so I'll make this short, paths and quest. So one thing I did was like, there's a lot of content out there, it can be a lot. So I thought it would be cool to do this thing which I call paths and quests. It's loosely derived from other things as well. It's kind of these bite-sized adventures based on curated content from all over, like content from people in this room right now as well. You do some research, like a bit of learning, a couple blog posts, and then there's objectives with what I call like real goals. So the first quest has you going out to a DeFi protocol, figuring out how other protocols might integrate with it, and then you figure out what all the edge cases are that other protocols might need to look into. And then you can write a blog post about this. That would be pretty cool and useful. This is a very cool objective, I feel like, because it's something that auditors do pretty much every day. Paths are like a more curated set of quests. So you want to do ZK auditing, and there's a couple of quests in that way. Here's a QR code. I hope it works. I put the first one live. Let me know what you think. I hope you like it.
Great advice from Joran. So we have time for a few questions.
Nice. So everybody agrees. Nice.
All right.
Hi. What about using AI to discover pattern for
learning?
I mean, AI is pretty good at learning pattern, to find attacks or exploits.
So I tried a couple of things to like giving ChatGPT an audit report or a bug report, and then ask it, yo, can you distill the essence of this bug? And it's very bad at this. It always either loses details and then writes something that's not related to the bug in the report, or it keeps too many details. For example, it starts talking about very specific components of the system and how they work together, and then it gives recommendations for how those components shouldn't work together, but in such a way that it's really not that useful for you as a generic description of that type of vulnerability. So I don't know, maybe my prompt engineering game isn't good enough, but I feel like this part of like distilling information doesn't work that well yet.
Yeah, I was not thinking at ChatGPT, but something more like doing simulations, you know, like using token spice. Do you know about token spice? That's like a tool for.
Nope.
I found that some time ago, but I didn't use it much. But basically, they are agents. So you simulate your protocol, and they are agents like AI agents, you know, that try to interact with the protocol. And it's a little bit like you can build, I suppose it's possible to, in the same way, you know, we teach AI to play Go or chess, you know, we can teach AI to...
Is the goal of this system to do security checks or to do economic modeling?
I think it's used for economic modeling and testing protocols.
Yeah.
But it can be used for whatever, for...
So I think agent-based simulations, very useful. I think there's a quote, I forgot who it's from, like, all models are wrong, but some are still useful. So this is for economic modeling, you can like figure out like parameters, do parameter tuning, kind of make predictions about how people will interact with it. From a security perspective, in terms of simulation, I think fuzzing is more of what you're looking for, because agent-based simulations are about seeing what median or like what the performance is under normal load, and security is about what if it's not normal? What if someone does something you don't expect? And fuzzers are like better geared towards figuring out like what things the code does not expect, and kind of triggering those weird behaviors. Although there's some interesting applications in like crypto economic security and figuring out the stability of economic systems, where agent-based simulations are definitely very powerful and useful.